Hi everyone. Today I will be going over a lot of tips and tools I've learned over the years for working on extensions that very heavily use catalogs and data. First off, I'll introduce myself. My name is Catherine Cook. I've recently taken over the role Developer Training Specialist at Configura. I was a senior developer before this. I've been a configurant for 8 years, and I've done a lot of projects, both commercial interiors and material handling. Currently, in my role as a developer training specialist, I am doing developer training. I'm handling all our documentation, both upcoming, editing out past documentation, and taking requests on what you guys would like to see next. And I'm also doing some developer consulting, internally and externally. And I am loving this new role. So today, we'll be going over a few things. First one we'll be going over is a lot of information about writing load code for DSP data. So when catalog changes go out, how do you as a developer need to react to that? Then we'll go over a bunch of miscellaneous debug tools that I have written over the years. I'm not going to go over code for those, but at least conceptually I will go over them, and then you can find the code for them in Developer Fika after the presentation. I'm going to touch a little bit on the alternative catalogs toggle. I'm not going to go into it deeply because we have done a presentation on it before, and you can find that presentation on YouTube. And then lastly, I will go over a bunch of tips for using the data proxy and why you should, and then a bunch of cool things you can use that for. So first, we'll go over writing load code for DSP data. The problem that we all have to deal with is a lot of data changes in catalogs, and it's either like products get discontinued or different offerings change or options become illogical, or you don't have control over the catalogs and some other department does, and you need to account for it. And we really don't want user drawings becoming broken when they load in old drawings that are expect to be pointing at the catalog in a previous state than it is right now. In the worst case, we as developers do nothing. And this is a major problem for users because their data, when they load their drawing, will not be able to link to the proper catalog. It sometimes can't even find it. We don't want that. We want their drawing to be in a stable state when they get when their drawing finishes loading. We want them to be able to get working right away. We want as few changes as possible, and we want them to be able to start their job with as few inconveniences as we can make. If we do nothing, sometimes they'll load their drawings in options that they had previously selected are now invalid, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want them to lose their previous choices and information. And then one of the problems a lot of developers who have worked with data have probably seen before is that if you load a drawing and a snapper has data, and that data, you click on it, and it builds that green properties box. One of the situations that'll happen is that will go to build itself, and if the option you have selected for that feature is invalid, it'll just show up blank. In other cases, the property will just disappear entirely. And if the property disappears entirely, then if the property disappears entirely, then the user doesn't have access to that property to change it to something that is valid. So they're truly hosed in that case. They can't actually go in and change it to something to make it be visible because it's not visible. All in all, awful user situation. And then the last case, this is probably one of the more important ones, is that if one of your options that is now invalid was a SKU select feature, meaning that whatever option you choose helps build up the child part number. In the case where you build your catalogs where there are parent products and child products, a lot of extensions do this, and a lot of manufacturers set up their catalogs like this, where the parent product will have a feature. That feature will be SKU select, and based on which child option you choose, it actually builds up the child product. And when they do this, they'll often link the model to that child product, because depending on which one gets chosen, you're going to have a lot of model differences. If the option that is currently selected is missing and the model is linked to that option, then it's possible that your snapper could be completely invisible. It won't be able to pull a model. And in that case, a user is going to think their snapper has completely disappeared or been deleted, even when it hasn't. And if it's invisible, then the user can't even select it in order to generate the properties box and change the features to something that is valid. We don't want their symbols seemingly disappearing. We want to make their lives easier. In the meh case, one of the things we can do is basically check every single data on load that's from your extension and your snappers, and then check all of its options and find any ones that are invalid, and if any are invalid, just set them to defaults. The user risks losing options in this case, but at least their drawing is stable, and the products are still there, and they can get going right away. Data loss and information loss isn't enjoyable, and it's not a good user experience, but at least they can start working. Which leads us to our best case. We, as developers, can write load code to update our DSP datas to something that is basically a much better solution. This is the best user experience and causes the least disruption to them. Whether that's, hey, your option that you have selected here, the option code is actually changed. This is the equivalent, so we'll take your data and change your saved option codes to the new one. Or, hey, this one was removed, we'll set it to the default or set it to the replacement, because we have manufacturer suggestions for a replacement option. Or this product had this part number and now it's been renamed to this part number. Lots of different cases. We're going to go over them in a minute, but basically we want to create as little disruption and as few changes since the user last opening the drawing as we can. The next few slides I'm going to go over are a bunch of reference slides that I've written up, and I have given it to any catalog specialists that are on any projects I work on, because I know frequently they're not also developers, and so they need to know what I need in order to write good load code. This first list is going to be a list of changes in catalogs that do require load code. This is a good reference list for any catalog specialists who need to determine if they need to pass a ticket on to the programmers to write load code for the changes that they're making. So first, your feature order changing on a product. So that means your top level features or your sub-level features, their order, their structure is different, and now the indexes will be altered. This can include features being removed, features being added, and I add, let me go back. So I added an asterisk to this one because if you're adding a feature at the end of a leaf path or to the end of a top level feature list, this might be unnecessary, but only unnecessary if you have some sort of generic load code. After I go through these lists, I will talk about generic load code and why it's useful, but most things that I have asterisked in here may not actually be necessary or may not require load code if you have such a failsafe in place, but we will go over that. If your feature order is rearranged, that means the order of the features has changed. Or if your feature has changed a level in the tree, maybe this sub-level feature is now a top-level feature, or vice versa. Another thing that requires load code is having your option codes change, or your option codes removed. In this case, it might not be necessary if you have a generic load code method, but we'll go over that. You'll need load code if part numbers change. This gets a little bit more complicated with SKU select. I'm going to be writing some examples to put in developer Fika and how to handle that situation. and if price list codes change. The next list we have is a list of changes that do not require load code. Options added. In this case, it's not possible for a user to have had this option selected, so we don't need to react to them having it selected. If feature codes change, you don't need load code unless your extension was written such that you actually look at feature codes and store them and react to them. Most extensions don't do this, but a couple I know of do. So this one, I'm adding a caveat because this is only if your extension does not rely on feature codes. If your extension does rely on feature codes, then you will have to update. You may have to write load code for that or change actual code in your extension if you're trying to look at data and you have hard-coded feature codes that you're checking against. If your part, feature, or option description changes, again, this is only if your extension actually hard codes, reacts to these, saves them out. Most don't. If prices change, if options are removed, now you only don't require load code for removed options if you have a generic load code method. And if features are added at the end of the feature tree, so in your top level features, so your indexes, 0 through however many features you have, or if they're added at the end of a leaf path, so feature, sub-feature, sub-feature, and then maybe you add another one down the tree as a leaf. Again, this, I added an asterisk. You do not need load code if you have generic load code method. Now to go over what snappers and objects are affected. If no load code is written to protect your DSP data objects, you need to know what's actually at risk. Basically, all loaded DSP data objects associated with your catalogs could be affected. Some examples include a PGC snapper that has a DSP data stored on it, or a data symbol that you added from catalog browser pointing to a catalog you're working with. Any cached DSP data may be stored on world or as a global. If a global, it's not saved out. So maybe not in the global case, but at least if it's stored on the world and you save it out as some sort of CEDR data, that will be affected. And then also any data is stored with schemes. Basically, any DSP data that have been saved out in any situation. These are just examples, not a complete list. But any data that have gotten saved out and you're now loading again are at risk of not being complete or not fully being stable if you do not write load code. Now, what if your data is only available through CIL and then you don't have an extension? In this case, no solution currently exists because you do not have a solution, or you do not have an extension. Therefore, you cannot supply code to react to any of this. So in this case, there's no existing solution, which is a shame. But hopefully, we come up with one in the future. I know it's a feature request that I will be requesting, likely in the future, because it is something that I think would be a good feature to have. Now this is a reference list of everything, at least I, as a developer, need in order to write good load code for my catalogs. This is a list that I have given to my catalog specialists that I work with, and I say, hey, when you are making changes that fall under the category of things that do need load code, this is the information I need from you. I need to know what features are actually changing. I need to know what products have those features and which products I need to be on the lookout in order to catch and fix. I need to know exactly what is changing. Is it an option? Are things removed? Are things being added? Are things being rearranged? Is a price list code changing? I need to know pretty much exactly what is changing so I can catch everything that may be affected. I need to know the new catalog version number that will contain these changes. One thing, a tip I will add to this one, I will always recommend to any catalog specialists I work on or any manufacturers building up their own catalogs that when you are making catalog changes, to basically use incrementing integers for your versions in your product catalogs, and then use incrementing ones for each batch of changes that actually get uploaded and pushed out. This makes load code both easy and performant. If my catalog is at version 3, and then my specialist makes a bunch of changes, bumps the version up to 4, and pushes it out, I, as a developer, can say, oh, is the catalog version on the data I just loaded in less than 4? Yes, it is. All right, I'll just react to it accordingly. And thus, I don't have to catch and say, are you specifically this random string version, or this random string version, or this one, or this one, or this one. If you make them incrementing integers, it makes life so much easier, and you don't have to do a lot of random string checks and hope you didn't miss some. I also need to know when I have to have the load code written by. I need to know when these changes are going live so that I can write my code to react to it, build it, get it through QA testing, and then get it out to users to have in their hands before these catalog changes get pushed. Because as soon as the catalog changes get pushed, they're going to get downloaded to the user's computers immediately, at least for anyone whose CET is on and has their catalog downloader running. Let's see. And one of the things that I will also recommend when you're using your version numbers that are just incrementing integers, this allows me to not have to hard code version numbers in my extension. I never have to supply one when I am creating data, and I never have to be aware of what versions are actually out and published by the catalog specialists, except in the case of load code. Because I can just create data and I call the function set active catalog version, and then I get them the most recent version number, and I'm good to go, and I don't actually have to care about it. And it's really nice not having to hard code version numbers. Therefore, if a catalog developer pushes out a bunch of changes that do not require load code, then I don't need to change the extension's code and rebuild and push out and have the user download it just to get that new version number. I can just have my extension always set active product catalog version, and then I will always have the most up-to-date one. I considered going over how to write DSP data load code for all of these situations, but I decided not to because my time for this presentation is limited, and there's already an example of all of those different types in Fika, and I added the file path here. There is a file called testing data proxy. If you look at this immediately in 15.0, it'll probably be in Fika / Sorry, my headset turns off if I do not hear sound out of it every few minutes. But if you will find it in Fika / Office for now, but if you go to 15.5 or later, it is highly likely it will be in Fika / Office / examples. Currently, I am making a sub-extension down in there for all developer examples that I write either on dev training or developer support, or examples that get created for CET presentations, and that will only be visible in developer mode, so it's just pure developer examples. And so further examples are for all the different types of load code are available in there. More are going to be added at the next release that I am busy writing and updating. So if you would like to know how to write each of these, you can just go and look there. If you have further questions about them or they are not complete enough, feel free to message dev support. She will forward those on to me, and I can get them written and included in. Now, this is something that I've mentioned as a caveat to a few of the points before this on previous slides. This is something that I will always highly recommend to anyone who is working on an extension that uses data. And that's having a validation method that will run on every single DSP data in your extension on load. So basically, what is that? It is, I have found that it's really good practice to write a generic load code function. It runs on every single DSP data after it's loaded, ideally triggered by the data proxy, so that it always works for data symbols from catalog browser, as well as any data that is actually found in your extension, whether that's CETR data, or schemes data, or snapper data, any of those. But if you trigger it via the data proxy, then you can also get it to apply and run to any symbols that were added via catalog browser. Even though they are straight up class data symbol and you cannot edit the class because it's pulled from a different extension, a configure extension, you still have an injection point via the data proxy. We'll go over the data proxy more further along in this presentation, but that is one thing, that's a good location to trigger this method here. This validation method will run at the end of every data's load cycle that will guarantee that the data is in a stable and valid state. So, why is this necessary? We as developers need to get our DSP data into a valid state before the user starts working. We basically need a safety net. A whole bunch of potential problems could come up. Here are just some examples that I have personally experienced in my years at Configura. Perhaps a catalog specialist doesn't realize a change actually needs load code. Maybe I forgot to give them the list of what changes actually do require reaction code by me or any other dev. Perhaps a catalog specialist forgot to tell me that developer load code was necessary or that something changed. Or maybe they had to do a whole bunch of tickets at once and most of them didn't require load code, but one did. But since they were all grouped together in a batch, you didn't realize. It's possible that a catalog specialist could have given me incomplete information because they didn't realize, oh, this other product was actually affected or actually had this feature. Or I could have been given incorrect information about what load code was necessary. I have worked trying to account for old catalog changes from who knows how many years ago, and I'm not able to go back and actually figure out what those changes all were. I can figure out this specific one because I have a broken drawing and I'm trying to load it, and I can see, oh, this change happened and it used to be this, but I don't know what all of the old options were. I only know this specific case. And so I really have no idea how to go back and figure out every single thing I need to account for. One of the main problems I've dealt with is that catalogs pretty much don't have version control. I've worked on extensions that were under control of someone else, and they're not around for me to ask questions to, or they don't remember this thing. Oh, that was a change 6 years ago. Why would I remember that? Or maybe your catalog changes didn't have documentation when they were given to you. Or perhaps the manufacturer doesn't want to spend money on a developer writing load code because they're super limited in budget. Not everyone has lots of money to spare. So basically and these are just some examples. There's a ton of different situations you can encounter where you're probably not going to be able to catch everything in load code. And so you need some sort of safety net. Again, the user could experience a lot of problems if their drawing is not actually protected from catalog changes. And one of the main ones that we mentioned before is that you could have certain properties from the green properties box hidden, and if your catalog changes affect features that were SKU select, you could end up with invisible snappers. In both of these cases, it is pretty much impossible then for the user to update the snapper that has the invalid options on it and then change it to something that is valid. So what this safety net method should do is that after all of your highly specific migration code is run, that means like, hey, in the method migrate data, I'm going to say, are you in this catalog, and is your version less than the current version, and are you this product and you're affected by this feature or whatever. Basically, oh, sorry. So my highly specific migration code is something like, all right, for this product, this feature is changed. So take the old option code, change it to this new one. Rearrange the features accordingly, such and such. So after all of that is run, then this should run. It should loop through all saved DSIP data options. Those are all of your cell options on your data. And for each of those, check if that option actually is valid. There are functions for this that are built into DSP data and into data catalogs. So make sure it's valid for the corresponding catalog feature in the catalog's updated current state. If it's not, set it to the default option using the method setDefaultCellOption. You should find any extra options at the end of the option list and remove them. Like an example, a product has 5 features, or it had 5, and now one has been removed, and now it's down to 4 features. You're going to have an extra option on the end of your option list that you don't need, and so you should remove that. I usually do this by checking against the feature key count. You should find any features that don't have an option set yet and set it to default. You can also check the feature key count to do this. You can use the top level option count that you actually have stored on your data and check against the catalog, how many features should I have. Example, you had 4, your catalog specialist added another one, and now there's 5. And then it should also recursively call the same validation method for any data that it finds in the additional data field. If you are using the catalog feature that allows for additional data, a common example I'll see is, say, you'll have a product and you can have it powered. So if you select the option that says, hey, I do want my table or my panel or my power pole, I want it actually powered, then it'll add an additional product, which will be an additional DSP data stored in that field right there called additional data that actually represents that electrical product. And it'll be like a power box or an infeed or something. So catalogs allow for additional data, additional products, and those get stored as additional data in that field there, and you want to make sure those get protected also. Load code does not run on those inherently, so you'll have to make sure that actually also gets updated. There is going to be an example of this in Developer Fika. I've already written it, but I have not merged it into 15.5 yet. I think code freeze has already happened, so I'm going to try to merge it into 15.5 minor. But regardless, it is written and it is coming out. So if you need an example of a method that does this, there will be one there in Developer Fika. All right. Next thing, we're going to go over some miscellaneous debug tools. These are tools that I have found super useful working on data-heavy extensions in the past. These are ones I've just written myself. I keep them in my profile, and then I add them to every project that I come onto and I start working on. And they make my life as a dev working with data so much easier. You don't have to use any of these, they're optional, but if they sound like something that would be really useful to you, feel free to do something similar. I'm adding my version of all these tools into Developer Fika, so you can look there if you would like to see them. So I have CET here. Here we have the Fika office, and as a sub-extension there's Fika developer examples. I have added a section called User Debug Tools with a whole bunch of the debug tools that I've written in the past. One of the very nice things about having a library section like this is that you can keep it hidden if you are a developer, because you don't really want to make a whole bunch of random dev tools available to users at all times. They don't really need more buttons to be confused by, especially if you're using developer lingo. And some buttons, if they actually act and affect things, you don't want them just being clicked if you don't know what it does. So let's just go through them. I'll usually stick a button that'll wipe all caches and force rebuild 2D for all of these symbols for the extension I'm working in. Same with 3D. I'll make a button that'll actually open up catalog details. And one of the reasons I make this one, well, actually a lot of these, is that this catalog details menu is pretty deep. It's pretty far. Let's see. You have to go to Control Panel, and then you go to Catalog Details here, or you go through the Catalog Browser, and then through the there's like 3 or 4 windows deep to get to Catalog Details. And one of the reasons that I made a set of tools that are accessible through the library is that I have in the past found that I'll need to get on a call with a user because they can consistently reproduce an issue and I cannot in developer mode. And so I need to get on a call with them so I can have them show me the issue. And a lot of times they're already stressed out. They don't know developer lingo. They don't know where all their random files are, and I don't want to have to write up a developer tool and then change the code in the extension and then rebuild and push it out and have the user download that update, I don't want all users to have to download an update when I'm just trying to debug with one specific user, and then go, hey user, please go find your log files and then send them to me here so I can look at them and whatever, and it's just a huge hassle. So one of the things I'll do is I'll put all the tools in a limb that is only visible if you're in a certain channel. And then for whatever extension it is, I'll make a channel called User Debug Tools. And then when I get on a call with a user, I'll add them to that channel. I'll say restart your CET. It'll download channel information. These will now become visible so they can see them now, and I can just say, show me your catalog details. I need to know what catalogs you actually have, which ones are on. I need to know what the actual state of your CET is. Or I need to know why their symbol in their drawing is being really weird and I want to see the state of the data and what it's actually pointing at. And there's no way for them to see all this really good developer data for them to know, like, hey, what's your enterprise code? Or your product catalog version. I need to know your parent product versus your child product. Like, that's really hard information to find. Same with core. I'll have a button that prints out core settings or project settings. Lots of different information that would normally be pretty hard to get to, but I make it easily accessible with a set of buttons. After I say, all right, well, show me all of your debug information here. They click the button, I screenshot, and I say, all right, good to go. Thank you, I've got the information I need. I'll end the call, I'll remove them from the channel, and the buttons disappear for them. I don't have to do any rebuilds of my extension, and they can just they can get me the info with as little inconvenience to them as possible. So opening up catalog details, super easy for a person then to just open this up and not have to go through all the menus to get to this point. I'll also add inspect. This actual inspector window is only available in developer mode, which is a shame because sometimes it'd be really useful to debug things in like regular consumer mode. But it's only available in developer mode. So I made a version of that for inspecting data that I can use. It just builds up a whole string. Gives me all the same info that I usually want. Lots of things like, hey, I want to know my parent number, my parent product here, and I want to know my child product here, and I want to see my siblings. I want to know exactly what all my options are, my version. All of this is super easy to see just with the click of a button. I'm like, done. I click this other snapper, show me there. I'll show like, hey, what price list did the user choose? I want to see my alternative catalogs toggle debug information. I want to see, well, this is showing quick catalog info for my selection, but I've also done it before for cached data. So if my extension actually caches CEDAR data, I'll select one and I'm like, oh, I want to inspect this selected cached data because otherwise I have to go to my code and say, all right, grab my CEDAR data, run inspect on it, whatever. And if you're in a user workspace, then you can't do that at all. So I'll have like a version. Hey, I want to see what data the user actually has cached here. I also make one for opening up the catalog directory in Windows. This is nice so I can actually see, hey, what is actually downloaded onto your machine? Do you have the files you need? Are they corrupted in some way? And then if I'm working with a user, I don't have to say, all right, we're going to go here, double click in here, we're going to go down to this folder and here and here and here. Kind of a pain to navigate, a lot faster to just open up this window. And then I'll make a button that'll just force rebuild all my toolboxes, kind of similar to like force rebuilding all my graphics for my snappers, but just with libraries. So this is just a glimpse into like tools that you can write. You can if you find yourself doing something that's really inconvenient and hard to do, just write a tool and then something that'll make your life as a developer a lot easier and implement it. And like I said, it's nice if you can hide this, just make it visible based on a channel, especially maybe just call it something like user debug, not on by default, but you can add like your developers to it by default, sure. But then if you're getting on a call with a user, you can just make it visible, get all the info you need, and let them get back to their work. And then it makes everyone's lives a lot easier when you're trying to debug things. I'm just going to touch a little bit on the alternative catalogs toggle. This is a tool available in Abstract Data Symbol under the folder Alternative Catalogs. This was a solution that can figure a route to handle when an extension has multiple versions of the same catalog. Many devs have found in the past that if you have two different versions of the same catalog on, then sorry, headset turned off again. Found that if you have two versions of the same catalog turned on, then CET will find a match for your product and just pick one at random. It'll find multiple matches, and you don't want it to find multiple matches. So this is a tool that gets its hands into the back end of a data symbol, and then says, hey, nope, we are forcing you to redirect to this one that is selected with this tool. So you can use it. I personally find it really useful to use it if I have a release version of a catalog and a developer version of a catalog. And then I can say, oh, I need to test my migration code. So I will write all my migration code and I'll say, hey, I know these changes are coming. Is this code going to work? I'll make a drawing in release, having it pointed to the release catalog. Close the drawing, switch the toggle to developer, and I'll load the drawing. And then it'll run my load code and I can test it out without needing to restart CET, without needing to rebuild. Super nice. You can do the same thing with make it accessible to whoever is doing your user acceptance testing. If they need to test load code before it actually goes out to users, before it gets pushed into a build, test new catalog changes before those get actually uploaded to the servers, or to the release server at least. It's I know on my projects I usually make this toggle visible to any developers, any QA, and any user acceptance testing people, and all catalog specialists. And then it's really easy to go between different versions of a catalog with full control, without needing to change any code, without needing to restart CET, without needing to do any extension rebuilds. Makes life a lot easier. Other uses I've seen for it is having like a cycling system like A, B, and C. A is what's currently out to users, B is staged to be released, and C is in progress, in-flight changes that are not completed. Or you can have two different versions, and one is for two different regions, selecting, like in this case, an example of having a USA version and a Canadian version. Basically, any time you can think of where you need two different versions of a catalog and you want to flip between them really, really easily without needing to rebuild your extension, this is really nice to use. And you can also make this visible even, I like to make it visible based on a channel, usually, and when I work on extensions, I'll have a testing channel, and I'll make this visible, and then anyone who does testing can see it. So therefore, in beta installations that are not in developer mode, they can still test like migration code or new catalog changes before they're released, just by selecting a different option here in the toggle. I'm not going to go into how you actually implement it. Fika has an entire implementation in it already. I think if you actually open up Fika, you'll only see this first example. The other ones are commented out but available, so if you want to try them out, you can just uncomment them. And then there's also a presentation on YouTube from a previous CETX talking about how to actually implement this and how to use it, and then also a help article coming soon. I have already written it. I think it's going through review right now, and so that'll be coming out on the Help Center very soon. Lastly, we are going to go over the data proxy. This was pretty confusing to me when I first started as a developer. I didn't know what it was, why I wanted it, what I could actually do with it. And then the more I have worked on data-heavy extensions, the more useful I find this thing. So if you already know and use it, awesome. I'm going to explain it for anyone who is unfamiliar. It is basically a wrapper. It doesn't hold your data, but it is like an insertion point where you can inject code for or behaviors that you want to happen without needing to actually modify the DSP data class. A lot of times people feel like they have to override the DSP data class in order to add customizations to that class. I know, but having your data proxy, a lot of things will actually call the proxy first, and if the proxy doesn't actually have any customizations, the proxy will just forward it on to the data. In the case I have in this graphic right here, if you actually go and look at what load code calls the method migrate data, it actually calls the migrate data on the proxy first, and if you don't add anything, if you don't inject any behavior or code in there, then it's going to pass it on to the DSP data class. So this is a nice way for us as developers to inject behaviors and code into, we'll just add them to the proxy instead, and then we don't actually need to edit the DSP data class or even have your own custom DSP data class. The proxy is stored on DSP data, but it is not streamed out. Basically, when you start up an extension, you're going to register one per catalog enterprise. And I think in Fika, it's like Fika. I don't actually recall the exact enterprise, but whatever. Configura makes that one, so Configura technically would be the enterprise. And so any data, DSP data, gets one automatically assigned based on the enterprise. So I register a proxy to the enterprise Configura. It'll automatically get assigned here on load and on data creation. And then I can add customizations there. You can also provide a different proxy class based on the data actually provided. The registration, you can customize it a bunch pretty deeply, but the 99% case is basically having one proxy per enterprise. You can look at Fika for an example of that. If you, oh yes, so note that anything that you actually put in your data proxy is going to apply to all data that match that register's criteria. So the proxy is not really good for handling super highly specific situations like, all right, in this catalog there is this part and it's doing this and this and this. Now, I have done it before where, well, how would I word that? I've done it before where I say, all right, well, check against your product catalog code. If it's this one, I'm going to farm out migrate data to migrate seating catalog over here, or farm it out to migrate case goods catalog over here, or such like that. And then I can add more specifics in there. But you need to make sure you add catches like that so that every single bit of code that you put in the proxy, like, know that by default it's going to get run on every single data that matches that enterprise. Yep. So look at FO data proxy in Fika for an example of a proxy and a register. Um, and then we're going to go over things you can actually do on that data proxy. Oh, I meant to say earlier, if one of the very nice things about putting code in the data proxy means that if it's applied to everything that matches the enterprise, that includes things outside my extension, like symbols from Catalog Browser. So therefore I can, as long as my extension is downloaded onto the user's machine, I can write load code or any of these examples of what you can do, and I can write code that actually affects data symbols, which is really nice because a lot of times if a user cannot find a symbol in a smart extension, they'll just go and add it from Catalog Browser because, oh, I already know the part number and I can't find it in all these buttons. So it's nice to be able to have some sort of injection point to data symbols. So now I'll just quick go over some examples of things you can do on the data proxy. There are so many. This is not all of them. But like I was talking about before, load and migration code. Basically updating to reflect any current or new catalog changes. I can customize CIF exports using generate CIF rows. So if I'm exporting my order to CIF and it needs some sort of, I don't know, my catalog was set up and there's a weird thing in there and I need to adapt that to CIF format before export, I can customize that. I can customize parts, tooltips, right-click options, including specials in the query dialog. I can add invalidations. I can customize spec options. And by spec, in this case, I mean the method spec options, which feeds the calc dialog. So basically, what are all the rows you're going to have? How are they populated? And then push prop behavior. So when I am propagating, I can customize that also, or how I react to scheme apply and stuff like that. So this is not all of them, but these are the ones I have used frequently on data-heavy extensions that I work on. You can do a lot in the data proxy, and it's really nice to have that injection point so that you can affect everything, not just snapper classes. Because if I can also do data symbols, I can do scheme data, I can affect CEDR data, all of that I can actually influence via the data proxy. This is a recorded session, so I'm not going to let you all sit in silence for 10 minutes pretending to ask questions. But here's all my contact information. That's my configure email. Once again, I'm Catherine Cook. I am a developer training specialist now, not a senior dev anymore. And I also do documentation and developer consulting. You can reach me via my email here or through developer support. Our developer support team knows to field requests for me and to forward them on to me, either requests for documentation or explanation of concepts or anything that, like generation of examples to be added to Fika, anything like that. And that is all I have for this, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys learned a lot.